I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. Super glad to be here and to get to share this with you all today. And I wanted to say thank you to Rubes, let me know if I'm saying that wrong, for joining the membership. And this was a very interesting series, and thank you to the person that asked for me to cover it. I really love it when you all give me recommendations and ideas for coverage because sometimes I I had seen the thumbnail. I've seen a few other therapist friends cover this, and I wasn't sure. But I watched it, and I think the documentary was done pretty well. I do just wanna just say some of the language that I'm gonna try to use around this is donor-conceived people. So back in the '80s, I think we used to talk about, like, sperm donor, like, we used to say things a certain way, and donor-conceived can mean a lot of different things. Some people are conceived by donor egg, or, like, there are a lot of different things that I'll go into when we start covering some of the resources that are connected with this case. But the story is really interesting, and it focuses on one guy, and but I want to also talk about the children and what some of the children might kind of come up against as they grow, especially because there are so many children, especially in Netherlands and in certain areas where there might be 1,000 siblings, no, not 1,000. There might be like 100 siblings in like a 20-mile radius or something. And so these children, as they navigate dating, in their teens and all of that, they'll have to ask some questions that other people might not have to ask. I really related to some of this, so many of you all know my parents divorced when I was very young. I wasn't as close with my dad's side of the family, and that was just kind of how things go went. I'm much closer now with my dad's side of the family, but that was always a fear of mine, was like accidentally meeting a first cousin that I just didn't know. And so normally when I would meet people and if I kind of had some interest in them, I would kind of get to know, okay, so what are some of the names in your family? I'll never forget when I was in middle school, there was a guy who had the same last name as my mom. And my mom and his mom ended up talking because they realized that their last name was spelled with two L's. And originally, the Lloyds that my mom came from, their last name was only spelled with one L. And so that we likely weren't related. You can be attracted to people that kind of look like you, which can raise the risk of half siblings potentially falling in love with each other. And they talk about that in the series as like Luke and Leia syndrome, where somebody can kind of be attracted to a half sibling. And this is something that donor conceived people have to be aware of. And I also want to add, because when I mentioned covering this topic, somebody made a comment that the women in this story, especially the ones that didn't go through a donation bank, that they were kind of at fault. And some people they just want to start a family, and they thought they were asking the right questions. They were lied to and manipulated, and if they could go back and do it again a different way, which can be hard to think about because they have a child that they love, and if they did it a different way, it wouldn't be that specific child. And so there can be a lot of grief that goes along with that, and so I really want to extend some just support, and my heart goes out to the families that were lied to in this process. That's always the perspective that I kind of take with this. We can feel free to disagree, but that's where I stand. All right. So, what is this case? I'm going to make myself smaller. There we go. All right. So, here is the guy. Okay. So, that is Jonathan, the man with 1,000 kids. Okay. And it has risen to one of the top Netflix series since it premiered earlier this month. The three-part docuseries explores the actions of Jonathan, a Dutch man. He's now in his early 40s, who's fathered, in his estimation, about 550 children, but via sperm donation since he was in his 20s. But I believe they have found that there might be more children than this. So, what is this series about? It's a docuseries released by Netflix. Private recipients and donation clinics accused him of lying about the number of times he had donated in the past. The Netherlands has a limit. And so in the Netherlands, donation clinics, they said you can only donate at this clinic because they would track the number of children that were made with that particular donor. And they legally had a cap of 25. But all they had to do was just sign a piece of paper to say, oh, yeah, I'll do that. And he said that he wasn't donating anywhere else. And one particular clinic that's featured in the series, they mentioned receiving an anonymous email or something notifying them that he was a serial donor, that he had donated at multiple clinics and that he was violating this. And the goal of that limiting this is to make sure that you don't end up with one donor kind of overpopulating a particular area, which can really affect the genetics in that particular area. And so the guidelines limited a 25 children maximum with a maximum of 12 mothers. Okay. The documentary interviews with families who say they felt betrayed by him. And he always told, so with private donations, he would tell them that they were number three. And he would kind of say, I'm going to max out at five. And so people would feel excited or chosen that they were gonna be one of the 5 mothers that he was going to agree to work with. And with that, it ended up, creating a bit of a power dynamic where he had a lot of power. And some issues around him that come up are things like, does he have a God complex? Is he kind of narcissistic? Like, those are just a lot of the words that get thrown out when people talk about him. And he didn't seem to have any care for the effect of his behavior on other people because in his mind he's thinking, you wanted a child, I gave you a beautiful child. And he had very like long blonde hair. And I think his hair started out shorter and then he just started to grow it more and more. It was almost like he was trying to be like a messiah or godlike figure. And people would select him because of his like curly locks and that he was kind of attractive. Like those were some of the things that people would admit that yeah, like that was part of it. And a lot of his children look very similar, which leads me to think that he likely has strong genetics because many of the mothers they would have brown hair, but most of the children and in the series they don't show any of the children's faces. And so they end up kind of blurring out the children's faces, but all the children I saw all have blonde hair. And blonde, I believe, is a recessive trait, which means like I think his genes are likely just pretty strong. I just want to come back. So yes, he would meet. So he created, so it comes out later. I think it's later in episode maybe 2 or 3. There's a total of 3 episodes in the series that he created this longing for a child. I wanna say that's what it was called. Let me pull up my notes. I got a new computer, that's why the computer isn't freezing as much. I thought because it ended up being an issue with my computer, why it was freezing so much, and so let me pull up my notes for this one. Alright, there we go. And so let me just get to it. And then it also turned out that him and a friend and maybe 1 or 2 other people, because the donation site looked like there were like 80 to 90 guys that were on the site, but he would sometimes use fake names when he was like, so sometimes he would tell some women his name was like other things. He would end up going by other names, which is a bit of a red flag for me personally. I think they thought he was being coy, or he was being, he wasn't being as open about it, because these were just private donations. And it turned out eventually that he was active in 11 clinics. I think that was just in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands is not a huge country, okay? So the Netherlands is like, it's not huge. And then it also turned out that he would travel to other countries to also do donations in Canada, do donations in multiple other countries, and how he ended up facing a legal sanction. So a court has said that he cannot do any more donations. And I think it's one of the first times a man's body has ever been regulated in this way, where he was told that he could not do any more donations. The Netherlands Hague district court banned him from donating and ordered him to pay a fine of €1,000 per case if he ever violated that that ban. He has a YouTube channel, and I did not look at any of his YouTube videos, but he does have a YouTube channel, and people were thinking that a lot of his videos seem to be these messages for the children. It's very, very strange, because he would tell the families, especially the private donations, that he wanted to be active in the child's life. Um, so sometimes when somebody chooses to conceive using a donor, they don't want it to be somebody random, where their child can't find out until they're 18 years old, or so they just wanted to, so that's why they did a private donation, so that they could know who the donor was, and the donor would be able to be in the child's life. And I guess he did a statement to today.com that technically didn't lie. I followed the guidelines of every large commercial international sperm bank that do not inform the recipients about the amount of offspring one donor will produce. So that's what he said. Okay. And he also said, "I'm one of the best donors. I gave higher quality than any sperm bank can give." And that's where some of that God complex, some of that like, "Oh my gosh, I'm the best, my seed is the best." Like, he very much has a lot of that in his personality, and how some of that came across. Once again, having no real concern, in my opinion, for the children. Okay. So how many children does he have? It's not known exactly how many he has. Uh, and so, the children have tried to get together, and so in a Netflix series, they show, like, sibling visits where it looks like they rented, like, a play area, and there are just children everywhere, and, because there are a lot of siblings. And they also talked about a story where one, like, 11-year-old girl kind of ended up with, like, a little crush on, but not, like, for real. So but it seemed like it was just a little crush, and just felt very connected to one of her half brothers, and just opened up some of the potential issues that could come up down the road. With the new computer, once again, I have to look down at my notes, and, because I did wanna talk about those specific syndromes. So, um there were a lot of great resources, I thought, that were shared, and I just want to share some of the resources that I have in the description. And this is USDCC, the U.S. Donor Conceived Council, and it has resources for mental health counselors and support groups, family law, community face groups, sibling registries. And so his sibling group has a Facebook group, and and that's how many of the mothers started connecting. And yay. So I have resources linked down below for Jana Rupnow, and sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Uh, but she is a counselor for intended parents, recipient parents, and donor conceived people. She also wrote a book, Three Makes a Baby, and has a podcast with the same name. And she's located in Texas, and I have her website linked down below. She's active on Instagram, it looks like. And because it was one of you all that commented that I really needed to check out her tools and resources. And so they have different therapists listed, okay, and the family lawyers and all of that. Let's get to the next resource. So then I also have, let's see, donor conceived community. And this is a community group that offers peer support groups, because it's just a different conversation that sometimes parents will have with their child. And the one thing that I saw in the series is that a lot of the mothers and the parents, the families that were impacted by by the donor, they ended up just kind of having this camaraderie together where there just seemed to be a lot of support because you really felt it seems like they really felt lied to in that moment. They felt distress. They got really concerned. There were a lot of emotions that seemed to come up once they realized, oh, because when somebody conceives through a donor, you're thinking, oh, my child might have 10, 20 siblings in the world or something. You're not thinking they're going to have hundreds of siblings. Like you're just not thinking that. And so um and this has different resources. Okay. And then wanted to also share this resource. This is We Are Donor Conceived, and once again, just different. And this is more, I think, an international one because I shared a US group. And this one also has Facebook groups, online registries, and different websites and tools and things for people. All right. Let me see if there are questions. Yes. I heard about a case about a serial donor, um, but didn't catch if he had 1,000 kids. And so I don't know if Netflix just went with that title because it sounds like he officially might have more closer to maybe 500 children. Um, and so and they reached out. He was supposed to reach out to each place where he had donated and have them get rid of his like to get rid of his sperm, that he had violated those. And there aren't laws, and so that's what the movie also calls for there to be changes to laws related to international donations, and then also to make it more, instead of it just being like a honor code or like a pinky promise that donors won't be serial donors, for them to make sure that it's more regulated and that there can be consequences if somebody does end up donating to multiple banks, because he wasn't making money from this. Like this wasn't about money. This was, it seems like it was more about just him thinking he had this, like he was trying to repopulate the earth by himself. Like it's very, very strange, very strange. And then being blue-eyed, blonde hair, that he was in high demand, which I think that also just increased things as well. That's just what I think personally. Um Man, there was a doctor, a fertility doctor that switched his sperm. So as soon as I heard about this case, it brought up the Netflix series Our Father for me. And I never covered that one. But I'm just trying to get this page ready to share it. But one of the children that this happened to, she now is an advocate, and she was on she kinda supported some of these families that were involved in this whole case. And it sounds like she was involved in trying to, catch him legally because somebody had to pretend like they were a new mother for the court to, because he would tell the court he wasn't doing any more donations, he wasn't doing private donations, that was what he said. And it sounds like he thought more media attention would make more people want to have him be their donor. Like, that's how he viewed this. And so it's Dr. Donald Klein back in the 70s and 80s. He was a fertility specialist out in Indiana, and people would select the donor they wanted, or sometimes it would be like a father, but they needed to do artificial insemination, and the father would provide, like, the person who wanted to be the birth father would provide their own sperm, and he instead would switch it with his own, and would he ended up fathering over at least 94 children, and, it was a huge violation, and, it just this case reminded me of that one. This guy who thought, like, not only am I gonna be a fertility doctor, but I'm going to, like, have all of these people have my children, and that's not what any of those parents wanted, and, when people realized that this is what had happened, especially the ones where the the mother's partner, they were the one that wanted to be the birth father, and then to find out that somebody had done this, it really just brought up a lot. Let me know if y'all have questions about this. Yes, I know, I know. Like, that's a real story, that's a real thing that happened. Um, Whoa, there was another story in the news recently about a guy who wanted his kids to find him if they wanted, and they're having a meetup. Wow, I think it was like 50 kids. Okay, cool. And, I think it was Jennifer Hudson recently said that she believes she has about 24 siblings, that her father has fathered naturally, and she wanted, I think, to try to connect with any siblings that she had. I like that as we talk about stories like this, that some of the stigma around being donor conceived, or that some of that has kind of come down, because I'm sure some of the fathers that were in the series, the reason why they likely needed a donor was because the father had a vasectomy that was irreversible, or maybe had a low sperm count, or there was something going on where they needed to use, a sperm donor. There were also, LGBTQ couples, and so that's where, for people that conceive through a donor, I don't have any, like, I'm glad that there's a lot less stigma in general. Now you'll still see people in comments having thoughts and saying things, and the parents in the Man with 1,000 Kids series, they did see, like, mean comments to them about, well, just people making horrific statements and judgments, about them, and it's just very, very problematic. Alright, let's see. Yeah, and, let's see. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss any comments, because this case, as I was watching the series, like, I didn't think it could get any more, like, I think it's well done. It just kept getting stranger and stranger, and by the end, he's being flown out to a country in Africa, and to, like, a private clinic where they, are trying, yeah, like, there are weird things that come up where it was like, so the statement, "Are they trying to bleach Africa?" like, was said in the documentary, where, it was just very, very strange. The whole thing was just very, very strange. Um, I found it interesting. That's why we're definitely talking about it here. Let me just make sure. Yes, the woman catfished him and they found that. So they called him a manipulator, uh, and a lot of people just felt very, very hurt. And in the end, so some of the mothers, one of the women described that they're like sister wives, and that they have this one man, and but that might have been what he wanted. It's just very, very strange. It's very strange, very, very twisted, very shocking, and it also comes up that he might have mixed his sperm with like another guy so that they were playing like a roulette of who could whose sperm would win out, which was so for a private donation where he would drive up and give it to the person, that they would sometimes mix their sperm together. It was Leon, that was his name. He was 6'3", no hair, had a scar, and it was just very and Leon has around 415 children. Um And I think Kairos is, like, one of the organizations involved. They've denied a lot of these allegations and all of that. Mhm. Alright. I wanted to find that syndrome. Yes, yes, yes. Because there is a doo, doo, doo. Yep. I'm trying to find the name of that syndrome. I had it in my notes, and of course, when I went for it, I don't see it. Let's see one more time. Alright. Let me know if y'all have any questions. It was it was interesting. But in looking at the doo, 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 it's the Jedi Council. Y'all, I am finding some very, very interesting, um let me see. But they were talking about just that there was an increased risk that the siblings could potentially um, meet one another and not know that they're actual siblings. And so as they began to date, they would need to make sure that they have to ask, were you donor conceived? Which is just because that's just because if the person is, they might just have to confirm that they're not actually related. And, once again, I don't think Jonathan was thinking about the impact that all of that could have on the actual children, which kinda leads people to think terms like narcissist and things like that he was putting his needs, his wants, his desires above everyone else and at all cost without considering anyone else. They did talk about the fact that the guy in the series, he grew up in a big family, always wanted a family, that he, was that it seems like he wanted attention and, uh, might have been coddled. I think that came up, but yes. Alright, let me look for it one more time because that was what I wanted to just share. There we go. So they don't have a ton of I'm not seeing research. It might be research on the other syndrome versus the Luke and Leia complex because yeah. All right, let me come back to the chat, see if there's anything else. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. It's a very, very, very difficult show. I thank y'all for asking me to take a look and cover it, but very, very problematic individual. He did end up, if he ever were to do a donation again, he would have to face that potential fine, but it's just a fine, not just, but like it would be a fine. But all right. So those are my thoughts. I'm glad that I was able to hang out with you all. If you all didn't join for if you're interested in my taking a look at Kevin Frankie's statement, that was the video that I did first today. This one was the second one. If you wanted to take a look, please do. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. And on Tuesday, because somebody mentioned that schizophrenia and eye assessments, that they've made some advancements where sometimes they've noticed that there are differences that can be noticed in the eye with schizophrenia. And I hadn't seen some of that research. Somebody mentioned it. I'm going to dig deeper into that, to be able to present some of that research to you all on Tuesday. That is the goal. And yes, Langston.
So I can't find the iPad.
Okay, I'm getting off now, and I can come find it with you. Okay. All right.
Getting off?
I'm getting off. Can y'all hear him?
So
What?
so can stay.
Yep. So you can stay in here. All right. All right. So y'all have a good one. I will see y'all next week. Bye.
What's this?